Foreclosure, it's the word that is sending panic across the country. You may know someone in your neighborhood who is going through a mortgage default, but if you are not in danger of losing your home, why should you worry? Well, the fact is, if there is a foreclosure within 660 feet of your home, your property will decrease in value, even by a small percentage. 2 or more houses, the value sinks even lower. And the ripple effect extends far beyond your neighborhood. When the housing market gets soft, consumers tighten their wallets, car dealerships and retail stores suffer, construction companies crumble, even restaurants reel from the chain reaction of a poor housing market. Today we'll discuss the universal effect of foreclosure. Joining me is Pat Beall, staff writer for the PalmBeachPost, Jack McCabe, CEO of McCabe Research and Consulting, and Michael Sicenzia, COO of Dynamic Consulting Enterprises and Chief Investigator for Glynn, Samara, and Silva, a Deerfield Beach law firm. Thank you so much for joining me. Pat Beall, let me start with you. Once foreclosure hits one home in one neighborhood, it really becomes a quality of life issue for the entire neighborhood.
Well, it doesn't even have to be a foreclosure. One of the things we're seeing is that when mortgages are in default and you have a pre-foreclosure filing, you automatically have a decrease in the value of properties, not only your property, but the property around you, according to a very well-received study that was done back in, I guess, 2003, 2004. But more to the point, the problems with the housing market right now start well before a formal foreclosure, a formal judgment or auction on the steps. People who are worried about their money are not going to eat out as much. They're not going to buy new cars. They're not going to buy furniture. And so you have this ripple effect. And then you have the impact of homes that are dark in certain neighborhoods. And also the impact, frankly, of renters moving into homes that perhaps people thought they simply would be in a single-family neighborhood and they wouldn't have renters next door. So those are just some of the issues that people
Jack
are
McCabe,
facing.
what's the answer? I mean, obviously you try to avoid foreclosure. Is this a cyclical problem? Do we see the numbers from a percentage point much higher than they should be given other cycles to compare by? What's going on?
Absolutely. We're going to see over the next 2 years the historically highest amount of foreclosures that this country's ever seen.
Why?
Well, it's primarily due to the adjustable rate mortgages that have been granted over the last 4 or 5 years. Most of those with extremely volatile cap rates that allows increases in the mortgage payments of 50 to 100% the first time that they adjust. So we're seeing a lot of people that have taken out what's commonly called 228 or 327 adjustable rate mortgages, where it's fixed the first 2 or 3 years. But in that first adjustment period, where back in the 90s it might have been limited to go up only 1%, now we're seeing them go up 3 and 4 percentage points and literally almost doubling the rate for some people. So it was because these mortgages that have been granted were really traps in a sense, and they trapped a lot of people that never should have got mortgages into buying to begin with, and now they're faced with foreclosure.
Well, Michael Sicenzia, that puts the banking industry in great jeopardy as well.
Absolutely, and it jeopardizes the entire system as we know it and as we've come to know it in the last few years. And the question is, what can we do to lessen the blow? What steps do we need to take to allow this to dissipate itself over a longer period of time, or whether or not we should get to the bottom sooner rather than later? And that's really the point that's being debated here. The fact of the matter is that we're in a dismal market, not just in Florida, throughout the country. I travel all over the country and I see it every day. But what we need to do now is to make a decision. In the banking community needs to make a decision. Congress and state legislators need to make a decision to allow for a system that will allow this to dissipate itself. There are fixes that need to be put into place. There are workouts that need to be had. There's a mind shift that has to occur both at an institutional banking level and at a government level to allow us to dissipate out through this process. It's a cycle. It's an ebb and a flow.
Pat, it seems like there's such an element of greed here. Everybody wants to succeed. The banks give these loans wanting to make a profit.
Yes.
Of course, a person subscribes to these loans somehow thinking that somewhere along the line they're going to pull the rabbit out of the hat and be able to make, in the end, what ends up being like a huge balloon payment. But number one, is it appropriate to regulate that? And number two, I understand from the consumer end that unique optimism, but the banking industry seems so reckless.
Well, you know, it's interesting because you have so many players in this. You have the person, you know, who's making $30,000 a year in Palm Beach County, and at the other end you have a pension fund or an investor in Dubai who has picked up a piece of that mortgage along the way as it travels from, well, you have brokers, you have appraisers, you have title companies, you have lenders that then bundle these into huge investment projects. And the issue of greed is very interesting because you really can't lay it on any one group of people. There's been an awful lot of wink, wink, nod, nodding all the way up the line and down the line again. So everybody gets to be guilty of something in this.
But, okay, Jack?
Well, I was going to say what really has facilitated this mortgage disaster that we have right now is previously banks originate loans, but they don't, in most cases, hold on to those loans. They sell them off to a secondary investor. It used to be that they were sold off to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac that had some very conservative guidelines. But what happened in this most recent real estate boom is Wall Street decided to get in on the real estate cash cow, and they said, we'll buy these loans. In fact, you don't need to go by these conservative standards. The higher the risk, the higher the interest rate, the better that we like them, and the higher the commission that we're willing to pay you. So what Wall Street did was they took these loans that most of them were destined for foreclosure from the time that they were originated, and packaged them into bundles and sold them off to different investors. Now what facilitated that was the bond rating companies like Standard & Poor and Moody's somehow in their infinite wisdom found that they could give these mortgages AAA ratings. And that's what made them worthwhile to investors all over the world. And that's why we have hedge funds in Australia and in Dubai that are now going belly up from investing in commercial mortgage bond securitizations here in the United States.
So, Michael Sekenza, this is becoming an international problem. It's not a neighborhood problem at all. Well, it is to the neighborhood, but it has huge dimensions.
Absolutely. The macro picture here is so much bigger and not really talked about, but you saw it a few months ago when you saw there was a tremendous movement in the credit markets to the downside. You see it going on in England today. There's a run on banks. In England, the system is a little bit different than we have here, but it's being exacerbated because actual depositors' money is at risk. It would be akin to walking into Citibank and saying, we want all our money back because you've lent money that you're never going to recover, so give us our CD money out of the account. That's what's happening in England. This is a problem that's happening in Australia.
So, Michael, you had asked the question before that the real debate is, at this point, what can we do now? What have we learned from this? What to do now? How to ameliorate the problem?
Absolutely. We need to get back to basics. We need to mark-to-market bank portfolios. When an appraiser goes out and appraises a property, that has an effect all the way up to the rating agency. The appraiser is appraising one house. The rating agency is taking 1,000 home appraisals and giving a rating to a bond that's linked to that house, which that house may be 1/1000th of the pool. So we have to decide if we're going to allow banks to write down this paper at a governmental level. We have to decide in the servicing arrangements that banks have with their servicers and with their co-syndicate banks, if we're going to allow them to enter into restructuring agreements with the borrowers. This is why we're stuck in limbo, because we're not taking the steps necessary to deal with the real issues. Everybody is waiting for the market to turn. Markets don't turn. The players allow the marketplace to take on its dimensions, its natural order, so to speak, and we're not doing that. We're stuck in limbo.
Jack McCabe, would you agree with that?
Yes, I would. And I think that we're seeing a lot of rhetoric right now. We're seeing the House at the federal level now is looking at passing some legislation to help with foreclosures. They're talking about allowing FHA now to buy a number of these different loans. and really go quite contrary to why that agency was created to begin with, which was to help folks that had limited incomes afford housing. Now we're talking about allowing these speculative purchase loans to now be bought up by the FHA. So I think we're seeing many different things here on the state level, but also at the federal level. They're trying to determine what's the best way to go about it. My own opinion is that I don't think they should do anything, quite honestly. I don't think they should bail out the lenders. I don't think they should bail out the developers, and I don't think they should bail out the home buyers who went out on a limb. I don't think people that stayed within their budgets and within their limits should foot the bill for people that tried to live beyond their means.
And you got in the last word, Jack. We're out of time. Thanks so much to Pat Beall, Jack McCabe, and Michael Sakenzia. Remember, for more information on the subject of foreclosures, beginning Sunday, the Palm Beach Post will begin a series on the crisis of foreclosures. Just log on to PalmBeachPost.com. We encourage you to share your thoughts. Please email us at issues@channel2.org and give us your comments on today's program.